I'm going to speak about the cloud from the cloud. My presentation is somewhere up there. And as I speak, I'll read it out from the cloud. Hopefully the internet stays up, so I won't have to. Yes, I won't have to wait for the cloud to come back up. Okay. I'm Steve Spence, if you don't already know it. We're with ArkiTechs Inc. As the Chief Technical Officer. Yes. Yeah. So next. Yes, this will work. Okay, good. Okay, let me discuss a little bit about how cloud has been doing in the Caribbean. I think cloud has, people are finally starting to embrace the cloud revolution in the Caribbean. Initially, there was a lot of suspicion about the cloud, people saying that they're, whenever I advocate the cloud or advocate going to the cloud, the first thing they ask is, my data secure? Where's my data? I don't trust where it is. Can the Americans get inside of it? Who's watching my data? And however, I think slowly people starting to let go that I guess in some extent it's true. There's some issues with security, which I think we'll discuss later. But generally in the Caribbean, two things have happened to make it really good for cloud. The ISPs are finally starting to roll out real bandwidth instead of the 1 meg, 2 megs that we are normally used to. And also people are seeing and understand the flexibility of using cloud computing. So I think right now is kind of the emergence and the establishment of cloud computing in the region, in the Caribbean right now. So for the most part, people are buying Office 365, people are using Google apps, people are investigating, even not the smaller cloud providers are now being advocated a lot by IT professionals, and people are actually personally going and researching cloud computing. So no more are you saying cloud and somebody saying what? They're now saying, hey, have I tried this? Have you seen this? Have you heard this? And so therefore, for the IT professional in the region, I think it's a kind of emerging component. And even in region where the internet is still not so reliable, people are actually interested. People and organizations are interested in the cloud, as you may understand. ISPs in the Caribbean have traditionally been the only local entities that are actually offering some cloud-like computing. They are normally aimed and targeted at the bigger, more extensive enterprise networks. I think one of the next wave of innovation is offering cloud for personal data usage, personal application distribution for smaller businesses. That hasn't quite happened yet, but somehow, somewhere, I think the digital then will say, hey, let's provide some cloud services for the small man, okay? Right now is when the banks and big companies are being offered cloud services right now. I think there's an opportunity for small, mid-sized businesses to actually leverage the cloud right at this point in time. So, something to digital. Okay, good. Popular cloud services. I know everybody in here either using them right now, either administrating them right now, or thinking of going towards them. So all these should be familiar providers out there. Google Apps, hosted email. I think that was the first real cloud killer app for cloud. Email was one of the first services that was that went into the cloud. Then the other applications follow under. Infrastructure as a service came afterwards. And I will explain a bit more about what infrastructure offers. Cloud storage and backup and recovery, and of course video storages, collaboration, video conferencing, and file sharing through Office 365, links, Google Apps, and Zoom. Okay. Expectation. Let's look at what people expect from the cloud. Everything will work like magic. No more compute, no more servers on your premises. No more need for the in-house IT guy. That sort of thing. That's what people think will happen. Reality is a little bit different, right? The IT guy hasn't disappeared yet, even though several organizations have actually embraced the cloud. things have just gotten more strategic and a bit more nuanced in how IT is actually provided and IT actually improving the efficiency of the organization. Cloud is one of those things that are allowing people to actually take more advantage of what information technology can do for their business. So the IT guy doesn't disappear, he becomes more nuanced and he becomes actually an enabler for the business instead of just fixing things. So that's one of the opportunities that cloud computing offer, that the information technology specialist or professional now becomes a more business-oriented personnel who actually use technology to enable the business owner to actually make a profit or increase his efficiency. Okay? He no more just backing up tapes and running down tapes and fixing machines. He now actually making money for the business. Okay? Okay, in the region, we still need more bandwidth. That's one of the biggest roadblocks to actually whole-scale use of internet. Yes, the last 3 or 4 years, providers have stepped up and actually provided more bandwidth, but there's the next step up left. Okay, so the 5 years back, this was cloud computing was just not happening. Now today, I think we can seriously actually approach cloud computing, and many of my personal customers are actually now embracing cloud just because the ISPs have actually delivered more bandwidth. Okay, commercial bandwidth, large-scale bandwidth, reliable bandwidth is still relatively expensive. The online version of some applications may move from a desktop app to a cloud-based app. There's still a feature gap between the two. And so depending on your business requirement, it may not be practical to move totally into the cloud. But as we progress, more and more applications are becoming just as efficient, if not better, inside the cloud than on the desktop. As well, storage is a big one because as a region, disaster recovery is a big issue. However, having that ability to put back in the cloud is kind of downside by the fact that it takes too long to restore or get back the data from where that data center is. One thing that some data providers are beginning to have is the ability to send the hard drive or ship the hard drive. Actually, in most cases, it's actually faster to actually have them deliver the storage to you by DHL than to actually restore it over the internet. So if you have a major wipeout, all the data, their providers will actually send you a hard drive, okay, from which you can then restore your servers from. So that's one of the options you need to look on when you're choosing providers for backup and recovery. If they are willing to ship or deliver storage from their data centers directly to your premises. And instead of, that can be done in probably 2 days, while, to restore 23 terabytes will take like a week over some people's network. So some of the providers are actually aware of this issue, have ways of actually sending that data to you directly. So that's what some of the things you need to look at when you're actually considering a cloud provider. Any questions so far? Or this is the standard knowledge, right? No problem. Okay, good. Is that quiz at the end of this presentation? Good. Right. Okay. Data privacy is an issue as well. There's a big, actually, that's one of the pushbacks I get. I really don't trust who looking at my data. Data privacy is an issue, as well as general cybersecurity is an issue that one has to actually sell to the customer as that the cloud is actually either secure as your current setup or in most cases more secure than most people. If you notice, most people who have been hacked has been on-premises hacks, right? So far, we haven't had a major breach of a cloud provider yet, okay? So most of the hacks that I've gotten so far have been people who have said, I'm not going in the cloud, I'm keeping it myself. Usually because the IT person is just too busy to keep eyes on top of it. And most providers, their business depends on them being secure. So they have a financial, motivation for making sure that they keep security as a high priority. Okay, because if a rumor gets out that they've been hacked, that's the end of your business model. Okay, so that may be a driving force, a motivation, but Privacy and also security is one of the big issues that people ask when we decide to convince them to go into the cloud. Okay, good. We are delivering this service, software as a service, in which the whole service delivery stack is delivered to the customer. For example, Salesforce, to some degree, Microsoft Office can be delivered that way. But I see there's a big difference between Excel in the cloud and Excel in the desktop. There's still a big difference in that. Platform as a service, you can spin up networks and actual switches, servers in the cloud. Sorry, I mixed them up a little bit. In the cloud, we can also deliver switches, firewall, and routers. Your entire physical infrastructure can be virtualized into the cloud as well. And there are advantages and disadvantages of putting that out there. Okay, I just kind of break them down in terms of the responsibilities and what happens when somebody moves into the cloud. On the left, you have the on-premises where the whole application stack is managed and supported entirely by you. Infrastructure, the server networking dimension are outsourced. Your firewall, your routers, your segmentation, your network is actually delivered, and then you take care of the application that run on that platform. On the platform, the entire OS and the applications framework is actually run on the provider's network. They support that, make sure that you're, for example, a website that runs your company web services. They ensure that the underlying web services are updated, patched, and up to date to take care of that. As well as you can say, hey, I don't want to run any of this. You take care of the whole software, they manage software for you, they maintain security, they maintain version updates and features for you. And so therefore, they offload that work of supporting your application for you upfront. Okay, and private cloud. Private cloud, as a definition of cloud, is something, what can private cloud actually offer as standard enterprise? Usually, and that's the case that whenever a department require or demand some kind of service from IT, they normally a long queue or slow response time. What cloud computing offer is that the customer, that usually a department or a department head, can actually provision their own servers themselves without readily interacting with IT. Okay, that's actually was the first reason why the first cloud services were actually invented. It was invented in NASA. NASA scientists said that IT was just too slow, and so they wrote an operating system that provisioned machines and network infrastructure directly to them without them having to call IT and say, hey, I need a server to watch the moon. And IT say, oh, you need 3 months to do that. And they said, really? Okay, so that's kind of what triggered the whole revolution about let's find some way of, number one, allowing the user to provision the resources they needed. Number two, to dynamically and elastically grow your resources without contacting IT. When my server drive runs out of space, I don't want to be calling IT. And that essentially is the theory of what cloud is supposed to be offering. And private cloud allow the enterprise to move into that dimension. However, as the downside to this thing is that this does require some amount of effort to actually implement. They require a high degree of competency on the side, and competency and knowledge on the side of IT staff. It doesn't necessarily reduce your IT staff. In fact, they probably increase it because your management of the system become a little bit more sophisticated. On the back end, you have to watch and manage a lot more complicated systems from that point onwards, and you have to manage how they interact with it. Public cloud, which is what most people do, is to deliver the same exact service I described in the private cloud, or usually over a public network, the internet. There are some provision that you can actually have dedicated lease lines to the provider's data center, which is one way of getting more secure, guaranteeing some security here. But essentially, all the management, all the infrastructure investment are done by the provider. And essentially, you, the user, is essentially a subscriber or a pay-as-you-use, pay-as-you-go client to that infrastructure. the mix, of course, and hybrid between a hybrid and a public and a private cloud, is that there are some people might choose to actually outsource or offload certain part aspect of the cloud implementation to a provider. There could be multiple providers inside that cloud implementation, as well as certain aspect that you say you want to have ownership of on your premises. The other components is like, for example, like streaming is like a good example. You may have your own streaming infrastructure, but you may have a once a year event that requires thousands of connections to support that amount of users. Since you don't support that user every day, you want to be able to expand or increase your resources using a public offering when you do need to. So one of the advantages of hybrid is that it gives you you don't need to invest as much in your own infrastructure, as well as the ability to expand or scale if you need to using a provider's infrastructure and network. So you're supposed to get the best of both worlds in that scenario. Okay? I think that's basically my presentation. Questions? Yes.
Stephen Lee, Carabnog. So my question will I'll start where you just ended. Very intrigued with the idea of the hybrid cloud and the connection of public and private and so on. So a couple of things. One, what have you seen in terms of like real actual implementations of those like in the region? If you know of anybody who use some like private platform which they can actually connect to a public version, like whether it's Microsoft or Amazon or whatever, Amazon, and so on. Yeah. And two, realistically, what's the what's the performance that people actually get when they do this?
Okay, you want me to be honest?
Yes.
In the region, I've never seen a hybrid cloud in the region. For me, it's a theoretical question. For the most part, most people do public cloud. Public cloud is by far the most popular and most frequent implementation of the cloud. What people tend to do is that they will have their own private data center, but there's no coupling between that data center and their pub. They might have a cloud provider that they're using, but there's no real coupling of those two services together. The things that they choose to keep on private, it remains private and uncoupled to the cloud. And in most cases, not many, well, I've never seen anybody, apart from the few geeks who want to experiment, implement a private cloud, a real private cloud inside of a production environment. Most people, they just offload that to the public cloud. So the major, in the region right now, the primary growth of cloud technology has been almost totally public. Okay? Right. And what they have done is use in the private component of it, they have just used the virtualization is probably the main manifestation of that sort of thing. There's an implementation of private cloud that some people use. It's kind of fuzzy in that people might not call it cloud. It's a combination of using Microsoft Hyper-V plus System Center, which does give you scalability, does give the user the ability to actually provision their own virtual machines. But in observation, I read that it's still IT doing all the provisioning. Even though you have the ability to send them a portal from which the user can actually provision their own machine, that never happens at all. All the end of those cloud technology, all that does is all they do with that cloud technology is that the administrators, the IT department, just have an easier time provisioning machines. None of the part where the department or the user who want to use that particular machine try to spin up themselves. That almost never happens. They still make a telephone call to IT. IT put them in a queue. Then somebody from IT goes and click a template, apply the template to a virtual machine, and provision that machine for that department and tell them when it's ready. And when it needs to be managed, it's not the user that's managing it, it's really IT. So what cloud companies have done internally for people in IT is essentially to make their administrative tasks a little bit simpler in that sense.
So yeah, I'd agree with you in terms of how it actually plays out.
Yeah.
Would the service that Microsoft offers with that attempts to connect a local Active Directory domain to Office 365 in the cloud and sync the directories and so on, would that qualify in your mind as stepping into the world of hybrid? Because you have identity here and you have identity there, and things are actually synced.
The truth is, until you just mentioned it, I never really considered a hybrid. But yes, you could actually consider it hybrid. Yeah, cause I've done it before. Right. But in my mind, I've never really I still consider public offering. Because what the motivation for when I do it is that I want the customer wanted to just use one user identity to authenticate the resources. So they're not really thinking of somehow codifying their Active Directory. They're just thinking of how I don't want to remember 2 passwords. Let me just sync my Active Directory into the cloud, so that when I log on to Office 365, I don't have to use another password. So the motivation for it is not really to make their Active Directory elastic and dynamic. It's really more convenience, really, that I'm leveraging that case. So in one sense, you're right. It's actually an example of a hybrid cloud, but the motivation for it is not a cloud reason to do this. It's really more convenience that people use that option for.
All right, cool.
Any more questions? Yes.
Yes, Steve. Richard Wall, ArkiTechs Caribnog. How is the cloud dealing with issues around communication and internet that is not consistent? And so if the tendency is to move to the cloud, you likely would have disruption of service. Is there some allowance that the cloud can offer to deal with that particular issue?
The two-time inconsistency with cloud with company in the Caribbean is major one is bandwidth. In that sense, with bandwidth, it is a hindrance to cloud rollout right now in the Caribbean. If it's unreliable links now, for example, the one that Stephen gave, that where we are syncing the Active Directory into the cloud, the actual it cannot mitigate the unreliability link by the fact that you have a copy of your database in the cloud. So people who might not be at the office, even though the office may be down or the link at the office is down, they can still access the resources in the cloud, even though so the cloud gives them the ability to say, even though servers and the internet access to the office is actually down, they still have access to network resources that they have pushed into the cloud still. So in one sense, the cloud allows us to leverage the cloud to kind of sidestep the connectivity that are not so reliable.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm David Gittins, ISSA Barbados, ISOC Barbados. One of the recommendations that they normally give you in choosing a cloud provider is that you ask for the right to audit to make sure that they're doing the right things in terms of disaster recovery, security, privacy. In the Caribbean, have you found that typically people go for that right to audit the providers, or they just blindly trust that the provider?
Right now, the first phase, I don't trust the cloud. We're in the cloud, we're in the phase B now, where everybody's saying that we don't care. We're just pushing our data in the cloud. I think the C will still happen now when people are actually required to actually have audited proof that they're actually protecting the data. Because what some cloud providers do is that they're pushing that responsibility to you. You are supposed to ask them about it. So some of them, that doesn't matter that they're actually offering, unless you ask them about their certification because there are two issues here. Some cloud providers do not like to tell you where their data centers are.
Right.
So you can't physically go to that data center.
Right.
In the case of those data centers, they have their certification that's supposed to prove that they have the right physical security, they have the right management of who can access data inside their facilities, and there are several organizations that certify that sort of thing. Okay? Then there's the other time where you can say, hey, I want to see your data center. You schedule a time to go there, and you can then do audits like once a year to ensure that they have the practice in place and they're also keeping up the practice. But right now, people at the stage right now that they're just shoving a lot of data in the cloud, and they don't really care.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Hi, Ash Alford, Data Protection Department. I want to ask you your opinion and what you've seen so far as it relates to data sovereignty in the Caribbean. Because I think that, well, I work for the government of Barbados, and well, I think that all governments are, to one extent or another, concerned about the sovereignty of their data and where it's being stored. I think in small island developing states, we have a kind of a unique position where I can say that I can't really say I have good geographical separation for my data centers.
For disaster recoveries?
Yeah, because I can have, like, in Barbados, I don't know how well you know Barbados, but I can put one of my data centers in St. Philip and the other in St. Lucie, and if we get hit by a hurricane, that's not going to matter.
Exactly.
Right, so I'm wondering, like, what have you seen with governments that are concerned about their sovereignty but have that restriction where, you know, do you see, for instance, maybe you have a agreement with another government or?
With governments, I haven't seen them use cloud directly, but what they have done is that they have had data recovery centers in different islands. So what they have done, they seem to trust other islands.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
And is this like, how, I'm wondering about the policy mechanism where that is concerned. Is there like a MOU?
No, I don't think it's just making it tough as a go along.
Okay.
Because when I do one or two consultancy, they're just following what I tell them. They're not telling me from a policy paper that, Steve, you need to do this, ensure that. No, they're asking me, hey, how we do this? And then I know one government that I know had a policy document, and they had a description of where the data is supposed to be, how frequently it's supposed to be replicated. So there's one government I did do that they actually had some guidelines about how data is being treated. And so what they did was that they had the primary data storage area, and then they had it in another island, in which they had to replicate it to another island. Banks I find, however, are much more advanced on this. Banks in the region, they tend to have very strong replicate. Again, they don't trust the cloud per se, but they have the same issue. In fact, I think they have an even stronger issue than governments in the Caribbean. 'Cause in the Caribbean assume that we're not really interested in that, but they are interested in the banks. So banks actually have pretty stringent and updatable policy about where their data recovery sites are actually located, and ensuring that a hurricane can't simultaneously hit. So therefore, if you're in Leeward Islands, it's possible for one hurricane to hit multiple Leeward Islands. So they can't really have it among the region. You have to have an island that more down south, or choose Trinidad, which don't get hit by hurricanes for some reason. Or in Curacao, also you don't hear Curacao talking about hurricanes as well. So what they try to do is try to put it in islands that are rarely hit by hurricanes.
Do you find that over time it's becoming much of a question? Maybe like when
it's much more popular now. Back,
okay.
I must say, 10 years ago, no, it wasn't as strong. Now it's becoming more and more strong, especially after 9/11. I think that was when there was that kind of pivotal point when people started begin to think seriously about disaster recovery and ensuring that there's no common components that can take out all your data. I think that's when there was that inflection point. And also, some of these audit bodies actually require them to maintain the AA ratings and their different ISO certification. You do now need to actually have these considerations in your disaster recovery plans.
Okay, just one more question. So, in your experience, have you found that there's any particular area or concern in cloud computing that is more of a concern to government than it is to the private sector, or do you find that they mostly have the same issues?
Yeah, but most of the same issue. The private sector is a little bit more, especially bigger banks, are a little bit more concerned about it. Governments are not so much concerned about it. I would say banks right in the region is the ones that actually have the They're the lead with this, and they have the highest level. And also, they're the ones that use cloud the less, the banks, because they don't trust it, okay? And it's a harder sell to actually get them there. Governments, for the most part, almost every government have run into Microsoft Cloud. Yes, everybody has done it, and they haven't really thought about it. In fact, even if the government at one end said, no, they don't want to do it, some department down below buying some license to get into cloud. Okay, they violate their own law. One people say, no government thing go inside here. The next thing they say, yes, you see an invoice coming saying that, hey, I want to buy 1,000 Microsoft license for cloud. But you're part of the government. Just give it. and they want email. And you know, by de facto, the email is the de facto storage for unstructured data. Everything is stored in email, okay? Back and forth. There's actually no policy about what to store in email. So immediately, everybody go into the cloud, and you know, they don't even consider it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, David Smith from the Barbados chapter I saw. My question was, are you seeing or have you seen any Caribbean organizations start to leverage the cloud outside of the sort of traditional disaster recovery, web apps for more advanced functionality than we traditionally use? So for example, I saw Amazon are enabling or essentially allowing the machine learning routines that power Alexa and those sorts of things to be used in the cloud. So now anyone who wants to add AI and machine learning into their own things, stuff like machine learning, big data, analytics, is anybody in the Caribbean starting to go down that route and really sort of get to?
Not my experience. There may be people doing it, but I haven't seen any of that. Yeah.
The answer is yes. There are people are not just experimenting with it in labs, but actually trying to push out Caribbean-based cloud products on that basis. One of the guys presenting tomorrow morning, I'm hoping will be able to give an actual live demonstration of one of the things that he did, and that's in the morning. And you also have, I'm familiar with a company in Belize, Belize Cloud, and they're actively looking at completely locally hosted services for local businesses and taking advantage of the local internet exchange point.
Yeah.
So you're starting to see these types of services emerging, and I think people are pressing deliberately to see to what extent can we bring the cloud to the Caribbean, which is why I felt that this topic would have been a useful Caribbean topic, because in bringing the cloud to the Caribbean, there are technical issues, there are policy issues, and there are some other like market awareness and education type issues that have to be addressed for it to be as successful and as trusted as we're seeing in other jurisdictions.
Okay, good question. Any more? Anybody interested in machine learning? Deep neural net? No? Okay, I think that's it. Okay, thank you guys.
All right, thank you, Steve.